Welcome to Jonah Group Bible Study, part 6 of 6. We're finally at the end. We're going to wrap things up tonight. And so this is going to be a little bit different format than the previous weeks, which was a group Bible study format. We're still going to take questions along the way, so feel free to jump in, and we'll take care of those as we go. Don't forget, if you got questions, respond in the chat for everyone to see, or go ahead and put them in the private Q&A box, and that'll get them to me. And Bill asked a question on this webinar, will you be using Logos 6 today with the new features? Yes. So if you don't have 6, don't worry. Many of the features will still work just fine. For those of you who have 6, we're going to be showing some of the powerful capabilities in there as well. So very excited to do that. Tonight's topics, here they are. We've got character studies, theological themes, difficult passages, literary structure. We're going to be talking about the prophet and how to do a deeper study on that. Jonah, the New Testament. We'll talk about commentary and cross-checking, ancient literature, illustrations, applications, just a couple tips if you're going to start your own Jonah Bible study, some preaching Jonah tips, and then kind of a catch-all search. Now, let me stress something. We've been going through Jonah for the last 5 sessions, and this webinar is designed to kind of wrap it up and help you tie up the loose ends. So as you're studying, we've been giving tips along the way. Now we're kind of bringing this to a close. And how do we get that last piece of information or that last part that we need to know to really study Jonah effectively and thoroughly and biblically? That's the purpose of tonight. So let's go ahead and open up the Logos program. And I have the personal book opened up to week 6. And let's just start off right away with some important things, and that is character studies. Now, there's 3 main characters in the book of Jonah. There's certainly God, and he is the most important character in this book. Then you have Jonah, and it really is those 2 as the main characters. The Ninevites, as important as they are, and they are important, in fact, to God, they're very important, as we discovered, they're the 3rd group. Now, you could throw in the other characters, the mariners and so forth, the seafaring men and the worm and the plant and the other so-called characters in the book. But what we want to do in this step is to first identify all the characters. Now, a simple way to do this, and some of this will be a review, some of this will be new, is to go to guides and choose passage guide. Now, what I like to do when the book is small is I like to put in the whole book name. No chapters, just Jonah, and then press enter. Now, it's very important that you make sure every section in your passage guide is collapsed. You'll notice that when everything is collapsed, as you see here, the report opens up immediately. In other words, your computer is not trying to search everything, which bogs down the process. So the way to collapse everything is pretty straightforward. You just click on the triangle, there's the information, and then you click on the triangle again, and that closes it. So if it's open, just click once on the section, and then if it's closed, you click it once to open it. It's like a toggle switch, real easy. So what we're going to do is go down, that's right, you guessed it, to the Biblical People section. And we click on that. In a few moments, Logos is going to look at the whole book of Jonah and identify every person for us. This is probably the easiest way to identify people in the book of Jonah, or any book for that matter. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that we have Jonah, and we have all the key cross-references, and we can float our mouse and read about Jonah in that particular reference. When you see those 3 dots, just click them, and that will show you all the locations. Now, for some of you, you may not recognize some of these additional cross-references, and depending on your Logos library, they may or may not be there. These are references to the Apocrypha. Those are the additional books that is mostly recognized by the Catholic Church. And believe it or not, Jonah is mentioned in those other resources. One particular place is in they call it the Odes, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and it's a summary of other scriptures. They're basically prayers, and it's part of a prayer liturgy used by various priests and monks, etc. And it's just scriptures repeated in another part of the Apocrypha. So just be aware of that. And so those are those extra books in case you're wondering what they are. Now, down below, we've got some interesting images and pictures, and depending on your library, you may have more or less. The one that's of interest, of course, is the biblical people. Here we have kind of a genealogy of Jonah. And this is where we discover by clicking on it that he had a father named Amittai. And if we read about that, we can learn a little bit about him and what the scriptures say. We can see he's got a relationship to the residents of Nineveh because that's where he went to do his mission. So pretty handy seeing these visual genealogies of people that you're studying the scriptures. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, if you scroll down, we're going to get some other people. And the nice thing about the biblical people section is that whether the people are named or unnamed, it's going to show up in this list. So here we have the group of men. Well, who are the group of men? Well, in 1:3, it's the ones that Jonah paid a fare to and went down to. So there's a good example. It went into or down into to go with them to Tarshish. So these are actually the sailors. At this point, they're unnamed. Later, they will be named. Here we see them that they're called mariners. Now, if you hit the Show All button at the end, Logos will then expand the list and will allow you to see all the individuals in here. Okay, it'll just take a second for that information to show up. And there we go. So there's God. There's the king. He's mentioned. We have the Hebrews. We have an idolater. We have a generic deity. The Ninevites. There's the mariners. There's his dad. And then we have the king of Nineveh and Jonah and the nobles of Nineveh. So this is an easy way to discover quickly. So very straightforward using the biblical people. And that's probably the best and easiest way to discover who are all the people in the book. So at this point, at the end of the Bible study process, you want to go back and make sure that you have not missed anyone. Very, very key. Now, there's another way to take this kind of further. And I'm going to show you a syntax search that I used, which can be pretty helpful. Now, this is pretty neat, and the chart of it, or the graph, is stored in the personal book, so you'll have the image. And by the way, if you want these links to work in the personal book that I've created, because some of the searches Logos records and you don't have to do anything, you just click on the link, like I did with the passage guide, and Logos will start the search. But when I make links to syntax searches, it's actually a link to a document. That's the key to remember. So if you want the links to work later after you download the book, make sure you name it exactly the same way I do. So I have Jonah, space, identifying individuals, and you want to have the capitalization, all that match. Then the links in the personal book will work marvelously. So what have I done here? Well, first, you'll notice that I'm searching only Jonah. I'm not searching the whole Bible. In fact, if I click on that, you'll see in a second here that it says all passages, which I don't have. I created a custom search range, so let me scroll down, called Jonah. And the way I did that is I went right down into the new reference, and I just put in the name of the book, Jonah, in both boxes. I like to name them the same in both boxes because it makes it real easy to understand what the search range is. Once you press enter or click save, then Jonah becomes the new range, because we don't want to search the whole Bible. We just want to search that particular section of the Bible. Now, the next thing, since we're in the Old Testament and we're doing syntax, there's only one choice for the Old Testament: Anderson Forbes phrase marker analysis. Now, you have these other ones, Cascadia, and that's all for the New Testament, but we're going to do the Old. Then I have this segment. Now, how did I get that? Well, let me delete this. You'll see that there's a plus here. So I clicked plus, and then I choose segment. Very straightforward. Now, the next thing I do is I click segment, so it's selected, and now you can see this menu appearing at the right. Then I scroll down, and I'm in the noun semantics section. And what I selected was deity for God, and then I chose human for covering all people. Now, there's no angels. They may show up under as creature. I haven't played around with that enough, but there's no angels in this particular passage, so we don't have to worry about it. By choosing deity and human, we're telling the Logos syntactical search engine to go into Jonah and find any place that's been tagged as God or human. So let's go ahead and click on the search and see what we get for search results. Now, if all you get back is Hebrew at the left, and you can see I've got English at the right, I'm going to close that off. All right, so I'm just going to delete my Bible in here and press enter. You'll see that we have an add version section. So I'm going to click add version, and then I'm going to type in my favorite English Bible, in this case, New American Standard, and I'm going to select from the menu that appears New American Standard. And sometimes that will kick off the search, or you have to press enter, or sometimes you got to click the white arrow. Logos can be a little finicky at that point, so if it doesn't work selecting the menu, if it doesn't work pressing enter, make sure you click that white arrow in the gray circle. With the Hebrew at the left and the English at the right, we can now scroll through and see all the individuals and their specific passages. Now, this is pretty handy because it allows us to see things that maybe we wouldn't see, or we see them in their verse-by-verse context. So it's just a same search, same information as the passage guide, but now a little more specificity because we're seeing the particular verses. So very, very cool. Plus, it sometimes tags people from what people are you. So that gets your attention. And of course, he's asking the group of sailors is asking Jonah, where do you come from? And of course, he tells them he's a Hebrew. So that's a second way, again, to apply this search for the Jonah book, but also this would work for any other book. Just change the verse range. So let me go ahead and close that down. All right, so that's one way to find people using Logos. And then, believe it or not, you can do it with morphology. And here's why morphology can be really strategic in finding people. Logos has gone through and tagged biblical people. Great. But if you looked at those syntax results, we're just seeing where they tagged it. But a lot of times personal pronouns are left out. That's where the morphology comes in handy. So I have this special search. So let's go in and take a look at that more closely. So I clicked on pronoun, and then under pronoun type, I checked every one of these: demonstrative, interrogative, personal, and suffixed. All of those are selected, and that generates this crazy code up here. Now we're going to change from all passages to Jonah, and since we've already created the Jonah search range, we can just scroll down till we locate it and just click it. Now we're going to see all the personal pronouns. Now some of the pronouns will not be related to people, some will. So that's the one downside of this particular search. But nevertheless, very helpful because it helps you to think through who is being referenced. So for example, in Jonah 1:2, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it. Okay, so it represents the Ninevites. For their wickedness, again, there is personal pronoun representing the Ninevites, has come up before me. Me is obviously referencing God. So using the morphology on the pronouns will allow you to see a little more detail and allow you to be very careful to make sure you don't miss any details on a particular individual. The pronouns are really a great source of information about the individual, the person that's being referenced. So don't neglect to look those up. Very cool when you're doing character studies. That's step number one, just finding out who are the people in the book. Now we're going to go to step two. Step two is where you focus on the facts of the individual. Now I've done a webinar called Doing Biographical Studies. Let me bring that into the window. And if you just do a search up here in the box and you just type in, bio or biographical, that is going to get you this webinar. Now this was done in the Logos 4 format, so it's compatible with Logos 5 and Logos 6, almost 2 hours. And we actually show you how to do a biographical study in depth. Now I'm giving you some of those tips here, but if you want to go deeper into biographical studies, that's definitely the webinar to check out. So how do we do this in Logos? So let's go ahead and open up our New American Standard. I'm going to move that over to the left. And by the way, to move any resource around, just left click on that tab, drag it over. Now, if you drag and see a discoloration or a grain, wherever that shaded area is, that's where the book is. And as you can see, I'm rotating here kind of a circle, and you can see the grain or the shading changing from vertical to horizontal. Wherever I release the book, that's where it's going to go. But if you move it to the tab, you're going to see this orange line, and that orange line tells you where it's going to be located. So you can actually control where it is on the tab scheme, which is pretty handy. Now, we take Jonah chapter 1, and what we're going to do is we're just going to right-click on Jonah, and we locate at the right person Jonah. Now, when you